Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I'm Miss Lisa, and this is my YouTube channel where I talk about everything I want to that has to do with science and math. And today we're talking about biology, and we're talking about animal reproduction. Now, if you are doing this as a class, you will notice that I skipped the chapters that we just would have had on plants because it's January here when I'm recording this, and you will probably be doing this in February, and there's just not a lot of plants out. So I'm gonna wait to release those videos once it's spring and there's plants out there, and we're gonna be talking about plant reproduction, and that's flowers. And there aren't any flowers out there right now to look at because it's January 2nd here, so no flowers. So anyway, not that I'm releasing this today. So we're gonna skip around some. You'll get those plant chapters probably last. It'll probably be the very last thing we do. So what we're talking about today is animal reproduction, and we talked about mitosis and meiosis last time, which was mitosis is when body cells reproduce, and it's for growth and repair. And then we talked about meiosis, which is where sex cells are formed. They have half the number of chromosomes so that you can still be the same organism, because one of the characteristics of an organism is the number of chromosomes. We as humans have 46. Sex cells have half of that, which is 23. So you get half from your mom, half from your dad, and then you are human. Isn't that nice? So we're going to talk about animal reproduction. Now, not all animals reproduce sexually like humans do. Some do asexual reproduction, and we talked about that some last time too, so we'll just talk about that briefly. So reproduction is making new organisms, continuing the species, continuing life. There is a terrible statistic, I have to tell you. 1 out of 1 die. Nobody gets off this planet alive. It's shocking, but true. So as organisms, if we want life to continue after we're gone, then we have to leave offspring so that they can take our place and be the new organisms on the planet. Excuse me, I'll drink a little water. So the way that's done is reproduction, new organisms being created. Now, first of all, not all organisms reproduce sexually. Some reproduce what's called asexually, which means it doesn't take a partner. They can make the new organism all by themselves. And we talked about the yeast, or one of those organisms. The yeast just looks like sort of a circle. We looked at them in my class last year under the microscope. I can't remember if I've made y'all look at them under the microscope yet or not, but if not, you should do it. They just look kind of like bubbles, and they just break themselves in half. They pinch themselves in half after reproducing everything. They make double all the genetic material, everything else, and they just cut it in half, and you have two identical, what are called daughter cells, that have exactly the same as the parent cell, and they're clones. They are identical. They're like identical twins that have exactly the same genetic blueprint. And we'll talk more about twins later. But so they're exactly the same. So to sum it up, they have no sex cells. They have no sex organs. That's mitosis is how they reproduce. They don't go through meiosis because they don't cut their number of genes in half. It's just mitosis. The offsprings are clones, and examples would be, we talked about last time, budding and hydra. Hydras look like this, and they can have a little baby that looks just like them grow off the side and then just pinch off and then go handspringing away. How cool is that? Another one would be planaria. We talked about how planaria, there's little flatworms with triangle heads. You can cut them in half, and each half will grow into a new worm. You can cut them in half this way, and each half will grow into a new worm. They are the same as the original. They're clones, and that is asexual reproduction. Starfish can do that. A long time ago, people at sea would get starfish caught in their nets, and they thought, oh, what a pain, and they would take a knife and cut them in half to kill them and throw them back into the ocean. didn't kill them. As long as you've got part of the middle body part, it'll grow into a new starfish. They were just making the starfish reproduce asexually. They were making more starfish. So they were sort of doing the opposite of what they wanted to do. They were helping that starfish out. So we talked about budding. We talked about the planaria. Okay, so now sexual reproduction. And if you didn't watch the last video, go back and watch it. It was on the mitosis, on cell reproduction and development, mitosis and meiosis. Go watch that one if you haven't watched it yet. But it is on the cellular level how sexual reproduction happens, that instead of mitosis, where you get a cell reproduced that's exactly like the original, in meiosis, the amount of everything is halved, so you can get half of your genetic material from your mom and half from your dad. So with sexual reproduction, it has special sex cells. It has sex organs. It's meiosis that is used. Mating is part of sexual reproduction, and the offspring are different. It is a part of sexual reproduction is it causes greater variety in the organisms. And you can see that with you and your brothers and sisters. You're not all exactly alike, that the offspring are different. And so it's a way of shuffling the cards and getting more diversity, which is good. So now we're talking about all animals, not just people, for reproduction and fertilization. When we talked about last time that with sexual reproduction, with meiosis, that the end product is sperm from the male parent and egg from the female parent. When those get together, it's fertilization. Now, fertilization in the animal kingdom does not have to be internal, which is what we have for humans. It can be external. Sponges can just release sperm into the water. It floats along to other sponges through the water, and fertilization can happen. And there are other animals that can do this. So some are fish. Fish can just let it go in the water and have reproduction. Starfish, sponges, I already mentioned, and frogs are animals with external fertilization. It seems like there's a SpongeBob about that, where SpongeBob talks about that he can just be a filter feeder, he can be like a regular sponge, but I'm not sure. And I certainly know SpongeBob is not biologically correct, but it seems like there was something about that. So internal fertilization is when the egg and sperm are joined together inside the female's body. So that is what higher life forms do, all the animals, cats, dogs, people, all of those. Deer, it has in your book. Now, and they also talked about breeding season. Some animals will only mate in certain seasons. Other animals will mate all year long. So certain animals have breeding seasons that are part of the year. Now then, for the humans, sexual reproduction, there's diagrams in your book. Look at those. You can see all the parts of the male and female sex organs. Look at the names, the different functions. For humans, sperm are made in the testes of a male that hang outside the male's body because they have to be kept at a slightly cooler temperature than body temperature. Isn't that cool that everything's just so perfectly designed? Then also, when sperm are released, there are glands involved that release things that the sperm need to be successful in their goal of fertilization. So you can read about all of that. The females, and so the male's sex organs are external. Mostly, there are some internal ducts, tubes kind of things, and glands. But a long time ago, I used to work in a hospital. And one way that people will use for birth control is something called a vasectomy, where tubes are cut so that the sperm can't get out. And one time when I was working at a hospital lab, I was checking the post-operative samples to make sure it was successful. And usually it was real routine, that it's always successful, no big deal. But I had not been working there long. I didn't know that this was a boring job because you never see anything under the microscope. And like one of the first ones I looked at, it had not been successful. There was plenty of sperm in that thing. And I was like, oh no. I was like, what do I do if it's, they cut the wrong thing? Who do I tell? And all the other technicians were like, what? And it was just like the biggest deal. Everybody's coming over looking in my microscope. Oh no, quick, we got to let the doctor know. He messed up. He messed up. So I always wondered if that couple got any babies out of that, thinking that the operation was successful when it was not. But anyway, that was just a little memory of that with me. I worked in a hospital lab in college for a month. It wasn't real long, and I did not like it. You have to get up real early in the morning. You have to be there at like 4 o'clock in the morning, so I had to like leave by 3 to get there at 4. And it was because you have to go around and collect all of the stuff for the lab so that you can start running tests at 5. And because you had to have all the tests run before the doctors got there supposedly at 8. They really didn't, but they were supposed to be there at 8, so that then they could go make their rounds. But we had to have all the tests run before the doctors got there. They do not want to wait on the lab people. And nobody wants to see you come into their hospital room at 4 o'clock in the morning with your we'd carry around our little stuff in little caddies and all of our needles and stuff. And people don't like being woken up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to be pricked by someone from the lab and to get the samples. They kind of hate you for coming in, while they want to sleep, and you shove a needle in them to get some blood or whatever. And so that was no fun, that people just hated me every morning. I like to be liked. And then we would run all the tests, and you would sit there at your microscope or your things and just real quiet running your tests. And I like talking. I don't like just being quiet with all my little test tubes and stuff. So I would start talking to the test tubes. Okay, Mr. Smith, let's see how you're doing today. Let's put you in the centrifuge. And then you'd get the results and type it in the computer so that then the doctor could pull it up on the computer. But my favorite part of that job was at 9 o'clock. All the technicians got to go down to the cafeteria, and our cafeteria had great food, and we would eat breakfast together. And I thought, this is not the job for me if my favorite part of the job is eating breakfast at 9 o'clock. So I decided that wasn't for me. And I ended up being a teacher, and I love it. Love it all the time. The best part of the job is not eating breakfast. The best part of the job is doing the job and talking to the kids. And just full disclosure here, I really don't like this kind of thing. I started this because of COVID, and my students, we couldn't be face-to-face anymore, so I started my YouTube channel for distance education. But what I really like is face-to-face with students, because I get my energy from the students. So I'm just imagining you're there so I can keep having energy. But yeah, this isn't my favorite either. I like to be at school with my kids, teaching them face-to-face where I can see their eyeballs and see that they understand. Okay, so back to sexual reproduction. So the female sex organs we were talking about male, remember that's how we got off, was the vasectomy that didn't work, that I was the lab technician on. And it was just the biggest deal. All right, so anyway, another thing is the female reproductive organs. They're internal. So the thing that produces the eggs or the ovaries, we talked about last time that one is released and developed per month once girls have gone through puberty till they go through menopause, and then no more eggs, no more menstruation, but they're released one at a time down the fallopian tubes, and if they're fertilized, then they implant in the uterus wall, and then it would grow into a baby. And if not, then they go through menstruation, and the uterus is renewed every month to get it ready in case a baby is produced. And that's kind of a pain, but that's the way it works. Let's see. So you can read about all of that, and you probably will want to go through with your mom or dad and learn more details of this. This is a good overview, though. Okay, so then the next thing, I thought that was in this part. Yes. One of the things we want to talk about is you can have diseases of the reproductive system. Now, some of those are, doesn't have anything to do with your sexual behavior. Like sometimes people can get very painful. Girls can get endometriosis, which is very painful. There's other things you can get, like ovarian cysts can burst. I had a friend that happened to her, and she got all this bacteria in her body cavity. It made her very, very sick for like over a month. She was just so sick. So there are things that can go wrong, and of course cancers and things like that too. But some diseases can be prevented by behavior. There are things called sexually transmitted diseases, or STDs, and if you have more than one partner who also has had more than one partner, like if you are only gonna have one partner in your life and that partner only has one partner in their life and you are together, then you don't have a chance of STDs. But if you or your partner have had other partners, that is how STDs are passed along. And so there is, behavior is a component of this. And it used to be a really big deal because people would die of STDs. And then with the advancement of penicillin and some things like that, then STDs weren't quite that big of a deal. So then we had the sexual revolution in the 60s and 70s and 80s, sort of slowed down in the 80s. I'm about to tell you why. Because there were less consequences. You couldn't get this death sentence from sexual behavior the way you could historically. So then there was just lots of partner switching and free love and all kinds of stuff like that. During my parents' generation, the hippie generation, they were into the free love. I was a baby in the 60s and a little kid in the 70s, so I wasn't a part of this. And then in the 80s, there was a little check on this because AIDS came out. So there was a new sexually transmitted disease that was a death sentence. And there was, a big response to that with, people talking about safe sex and things like that. And it did cause some people to reevaluate some of those behaviors that were really glamorized a lot in the 60s and 70s were not so glamorized anymore. There was a little bit of a check among people. But then they came out with the AIDS cocktail, where AIDS wasn't necessarily a death sentence the way it had been. The AIDS cocktail is not like a drink. It is a combination of drugs that attack the disease at different phases. So suddenly it wasn't the death sentence anymore that it had been, and things really started opening up again to have more sexual freedom. We'll call it freedom. But now, current events here, read this week that with COVID, there has been a lot more use of antibiotics and other drugs that has caused the emergence of super gonorrhea. It's not funny because people are going to die of gonorrhea again, but it's all because of COVID, which is why I'm even having these videos, is because of COVID. But there are STDs that have become antibiotic and viral medicine resistant, and we are getting those deathly STDs again that will kill you. Now, there are some STDs that won't kill you right off the bat, but they can have devastating consequences. There's one where there was a girl I knew who she had a one-night stand with a guy and ended up where she got an STD from him, where they had to remove her cervix, which is the bottom part of the uterus, so she can never have babies because there's nothing to hold the baby in. He would fall out. So, and she thought was kind of a good girl, and it was really embarrassing. But like, if she ever started getting serious and wanted to marry somebody, she would have to tell them, we can't have kids because I had an STD that destroyed my uterus, because her uterus was destroyed from an STD. So, that's kind of something you don't want to admit to your fiance. But I guess, I don't know, never happened to me, but I felt really sorry for her. I mean, she was just devastated from this. And also there are cancers that can be spread through STD. They think like Evita Peron, what she died of, was probably an STD she might have gotten from her husband. But so there can be really bad consequences. This is a very serious topic. And, you know, so something you need to probably study more about and carefully consider that. I think in our movies and TV, they just show people going to bed with each other just as soon as they meet each other, and they go from partner to partner to partner. And there are never bad consequences, are there? Nobody gets super gonorrhea and dies. Nobody has unplanned pregnancies. They are just shown as casual with sleeping together as kissing someone, and in our new movies and TV. And I think that's pretty irresponsible as a biologist, as a scientist with a biology degree. I find that very irresponsible of the media to give young people like you the idea that this is very glamorous and great without letting you know that there can be devastating consequences. So as a teacher, I think that's part of my role. And my role is to tell you don't do drugs. You know, watch out for behaviors that are risky to you. And that can be a risky behavior. All right. So next we'll go into something more fun. Well, you know, than STDs at least. Maybe parts of the other chapter, this chapter were fun, but and we're going to talk about animal development. So the next page has a baby and some kittens on it. So that'll be fun. So come back and we'll talk about animal development. Like, share, subscribe, and remember, science is great, and I'll see you next time.